the most famous leaders of Native American resistance, the history of the indigenous chiefs who fought the expansion of white settlers. Written by Charles River editors. Narrated by Jim Walsh. Introduction. Throughout history there have been men of war and men of peace, but few have actually had a war named after them. One of them was Pontiac, also known as Obwandiyag, an Odawa chief who left his mark on history by continuing the battle against the British after their official triumph during the French and Indian War. While modern historians question how important Pontiac's role was in shaping America's destiny, his leadership during Pontiac's war was seen at that time as important enough to warrant significant articles, and even a few 18th century books. Since these books were written by the British, or at least men who supported their cause, the descriptions of Pontiac were often not complimentary. Likewise, 19th century authors tended to portray him as something of an evil genius who plotted against the British and then drove his people into battle. Not surprisingly, 20th century scholarship depicted him differently, portraying Pontiac as an important leader who had more influence over his own local band of Native Americans than over some vast army. While Pontiac and his ever-growing band of men were laying siege to Fort Detroit, other tribes heard of his efforts to keep the fight going and began to attack other settlements and enclaves. Thus, even after he did give up on the fort, Pontiac continued to fight, next attacking area in the Illinois country, an area that included much of what is now the Midwestern United States. As time went on, his popularity and power increased to the point that the British ultimately sought him out to make peace. That is how, in July 1766, Pontiac came to meet with Sir William Johnson, the British Superintendent of Indian Affairs for the colonies. Together, the two men carved out a peace treaty that held for the remainder of the British presence in the region. When the country became independent, the new United States was faced with a fundamental problem. To expand, it had to settle lands to the west of the Appalachian Mountains, ceded to it by the British. However, the mountains were occupied by Native American groups who had no desire to make way for white settlers. The treaty had created a vast frontier for the fledgling nation, and any American settlers pushing west along it were bound to encounter hostile natives. For the most part, the conflicts that followed consisted mostly of the Native Americans suffering defeat in the face of a better-equipped adversary, interspersed with binding treaties, which, on the side of the federal government, proved not very binding at all. Occasionally, however, there arose a Native American leader of such ability that such defeats were temporarily reversed, and Little Turtle, the war chief of the Miami tribe, was one such man. Under his leadership, a confederation of Miami...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?